I was standing there in my dad's living room, that same place I'd been walking into since I was a kid. And yet somehow, it felt like enemy territory that day. And truth is, it all started with one look across the table. My dad was sitting there with his new wife, Linda, and in front of them was a neat little stack of papers fresh off the printer, edges still curling up a bit, and he was sliding them across to her like it was nothing, like it was just the grocery list or something. I mean, I could tell right away what it was. You could too if you'd been in my shoes. It wasn't bills. It wasn't some random form. No. It was the estate paperwork. And from the little I could see, my name wasn't on a single line. Not one. And here's the thing. I'd been half expecting something like this for a while. Not because I wanted it to happen, but because you can just tell when a shift is coming. Ever since Dad remarried, something in him had changed. He was different. He was there physically, but every time we talked it was like he had somewhere else to be. And Linda, well, she had that polite but cold thing going on. The kind where you're smiling but your eyes are scanning for the nearest exit. Every visit felt like I was the guest she didn't invite. But I didn't think they'd go this far. I didn't think I'd stand here watching the last piece of Mom's world, everything they'd built together, slide right into someone else's hands. So I said it. Not loud, not angry, just steady. What's this? And he didn't even look at me. Just said, just updating the estate paperwork, like he was talking about replacing the batteries in the smoke detector. Linda's lips curled into this tight little smile, and she patted the papers like they were a cat she owned. It's all for the best, she said. I stared at her, stared and waited, but she didn't even blink. My pulse was pounding so hard it felt like it was in my ears. I asked, so you're giving her everything? And that's when he finally looked up. It's complicated, he said. We'll talk another time. No, we won't. I felt my hands start to shake, not from fear, but from that slow, rising heat in your chest when you know a line's just been crossed. I left without another word, walked out to my car, shut the door, and just sat there staring at the steering wheel. You ever have that moment where you're so stunned, so blindsided, you don't even know what the next thought should be? That was me. And then, just like that, a memory hit me clear as if it had just happened. The day of Mom's funeral. Her closest friend, Mrs. Carter, pulled me aside. She's in her 70s, the kind of woman who doesn't forget anything. You know? And she'd said, your mom left you something important. You'll know when it's time to come get it. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I was drowning in grief, just trying to get through that day. But sitting there now, with Dad's front door still in my rearview mirror, I thought maybe this is what she meant. Maybe this is the time. That night, I drove straight to Mrs. Carter's place. She opened the door before I could even knock twice, looked me up and down, and said, I was wondering when you'd show up. She led me into her kitchen, the air smelling faintly of cinnamon like it always did, and she reached into a cabinet, pulling out this old tin box. She slid it across the table like it was made of glass. Your mother told me to give you this when you felt like you needed it, she said. My hands were already sweating before I even touched it. Inside, nestled against a faded blue cloth, was a sealed envelope with my name written in Mom's handwriting. My heart just stopped for a second. I hadn't seen her handwriting in years. And there it was, looping, steady, like she'd written it just yesterday. I looked at Mrs. Carter, and she gave a small nod. Go on, she said. My fingers shook as I broke the seal, and inside, there was a letter. The first line made my chest tighten. My dear Michael, if you're reading this, it means something I feared might happen. Has happened. I felt the words land heavy, one after another, but I couldn't stop. She wrote about how much she loved me, about the life she and Dad had built. And then, halfway down the page, came the part that made my breath catch. If your father remarries, There is a chance he may decide to change the inheritance. I cannot stop him, but I can make sure you have what I intended for you." My eyes flicked to Mrs. Carter, but she just sat there, calm. Mom wrote about a safety deposit box at the bank, about documents and accounts in my name already set up, already mine, no matter what. And as I read, one thought kept echoing in my head. She knew. She knew this could happen. And she was ready. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and looked at Mrs. Carter. She didn't say "I told you so." She just patted my hand and said, "Your mom was a smart woman," and I knew right then that the game had just changed. I didn't know how far Dad and Linda would go, but I was about to find out. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had anywhere to be, but because I couldn't get Mom's words out of my head. And I mean, it wasn't just what she said. It was the fact that she had planned this before she even got sick. Like she could see straight into the future and knew exactly how Dad might act. I made myself some coffee, sat there staring at that envelope on the kitchen table, and thought about what to do next. You know that feeling when you've got the winning card in your hand but you're not sure if now's the time to play it? Yeah, that was me. After 2 cups of coffee and way too much pacing, I grabbed my keys and drove to the bank Mom had mentioned. It was one of those old brick buildings that looks like it hasn't changed since the 82nd. The kind where the tellers still remember your name. I walked up to the counter, told them my name, and handed over my ID. The woman typed for a bit, then looked at me with this knowing expression and said, "One moment, please." She disappeared into the back and came out holding a small, heavy safety deposit box. They led me into this little private room, and when I opened it, my jaw actually dropped. Inside were neatly organized folders, a checkbook, a stack of official documents, and another sealed envelope, but this one was from Mom's lawyer. I opened it and started reading. The letter laid everything out plain as day. Mom had transferred ownership of her original property, her house, before she met Dad, into my name. Not only that, but there was a savings account with more money than I ever imagined she'd been able to put away. Plus a portfolio of stocks I didn't even know she owned. It was all legally mine. No loopholes, no way for Dad or Linda to touch it. And the kicker? She'd done it all quietly, without telling anyone but her lawyer and Mrs. Carter. I sat there for a while, just letting it sink in. Part of me wanted to drive straight to Dad's place, drop the deeds on the table, and watch Linda's fake smile disappear. But the smarter part of me said, "Not yet. You see, sometimes the best move isn't to show your cards, it's to let the other players think you've got nothing, and then watch them get comfortable enough to make a mistake." I left the bank and called the lawyer listed in the envelope. His voice was warm but firm, the kind of guy who sounds like he's always 2 steps ahead. He confirmed everything, said my mom had been very clear about keeping it separate from any shared estate with Dad, and that it was airtight. "Nobody can contest this," he said. "Not even your father." That was good to hear. But it also made me wonder just how far Dad and Linda were willing to go. That night, my phone lit up. It was Dad. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, I listened. "Hey, we should have dinner soon. I think we need to talk about the future," he said, his tone trying to sound casual but with this undercurrent that told me he knew I was upset. I didn't call him back. A week passed, then 2. I went about my life, kept my head down, but every so often I'd hear little things from relatives, comments about how Dad and Linda were making changes, talk about new arrangements for the family home. I knew they were setting the stage to cut me out completely, and honestly, I let them. Because here's the thing. When someone's plotting against you, sometimes the smartest thing you can do is let them think they're winning. About 3 weeks after I opened the safety deposit box, I got a letter in the mail. It wasn't from Dad, it was from a law firm I'd never heard of. I opened it and read the first line. "Dear Mr. Thompson, we represent the interests of Mrs. Linda Thompson in matters relating to the Thompson family estate." My eyebrows went up. The letter went on to invite me to sign an agreement formally relinquishing any claim to Dad's current property and assets, in the interest of family harmony. Family harmony. I almost laughed out loud. This was them trying to slam the door shut before I could push back. I didn't call. I didn't email. I took the letter straight to Mom's lawyer. He read it, smiled a little, and said, "I think it's time we reply." His response was short, almost too polite. "My client has no claim to your estate. He owns his own." We sent it off and waited. It took 3 days for my phone to ring. This time, I answered. "What's this about you having property?" Dad asked. No small talk. No pleasantries. I leaned back in my chair. "Oh, you mean the house? The account?" "Yeah. Mom left those to me, completely separate from your estate." Silence. I could almost hear him glancing at Linda, the quiet shift in the air on the other end. "Why didn't you say anything?" he finally asked. I let the pause stretch just long enough to make him squirm. "Because you didn't ask." And in that moment, I knew we'd just crossed into a whole new phase of this game. And they weren't going to like the next move. I could tell from his tone that he wasn't calling just to chat, you know. There was this edge, like he'd just been hit with something he didn't see coming. And truth is, I'd been waiting for this moment since the day I walked out of that living room. He cleared his throat and said, "Well, we should probably sit down and figure out how to handle this." And I just let out a small laugh. Not mocking. Just final. "There's nothing to handle, Dad. It's mine. Always was." Mom made sure of that. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I could picture Linda standing right next to him, arms crossed, giving him that look. And here's the thing, I didn't feel bad. Not one bit. Because while they'd been busy redrawing the lines of the family estate to edge me out, Mom had already drawn her own map. One they couldn't erase. He muttered something about keeping the peace and not letting this divide the family. And I almost asked him if he even realized that he was the one who started the divide. But I didn't bother. "I think we're done here," I said, and ended the call. That night, Linda tried calling me from her phone. I didn't answer. Then she texted, "We can still work something out." And that's when I knew they weren't just annoyed, they were scrambling. You ever watch someone who thought they were in control suddenly realize the floor's been pulled out from under them? That's where they were. A week later, I started getting messages from extended family, my cousin Rachel, my Aunt Susan, saying things like, "I heard you have Mom's old property. Is that true?" Turns out, Dad and Linda had been telling people that everything Mom left had been rolled into the shared estate. And now that the truth was leaking out, they were backpedaling hard. Part of me wanted to go full public with it, post the deeds on Facebook, let the whole family see exactly what Mom did, but I stopped myself. Because sometimes, the quiet wins are the best ones. A month went by, and then one afternoon, I got a knock at my door. It was Dad. No warning. No call. He stood there with that awkward half smile, holding a bottle of wine like this was some kind of casual visit. "Thought I'd stop by," he said. I stepped aside, let him in, and we sat down at the kitchen table. He didn't waste much time. "Look," he said, "I know things have been tense, but maybe we can all find a way to move forward. Maybe we could use that property for the family, you know. Vacations, gatherings." I just stared at him. Stared and waited. "You mean my property?" I said. He hesitated. "Well, technically, yes," but I cut him off. Not technically. It is mine. And after everything that's happened, I don't see myself opening it up to people who tried to cut me out. He looked down at the table, and for a second, I thought I saw a flash of guilt, but maybe it was just frustration. He tried one more time, talked about how Mom wouldn't want the family divided, about how I was holding on to grudges. And that's when I leaned forward and said, "You know what Mom wouldn't want? She wouldn't want her son watching his father hand his life's inheritance to someone else like he was tipping a waitress. She wouldn't want her son treated like a stranger in the house he grew up in. She wouldn't want me begging for something she already promised was mine. His mouth tightened, but he didn't argue. Maybe because he knew I was right. He finished his wine, stood up, and left without another word. And that was the last real conversation we had for months. Funny thing is, life didn't get worse after that. It got better. I started fixing up the property Mom left me, little by little. Painted the porch, replaced the old roof, cleared out the garden she used to love. Every time I drove up there, it felt like I was stepping into a part of her that no one could take from me. The piece of it was worth more than any money. One day, while I was working on the place, I found another small box tucked away in the attic. Inside was a photo album and a note in Mom's handwriting. For when you need to remember who you are. I sat on the floor, flipping through pictures of birthdays, holidays, random afternoons in the backyard, and I realized she'd been protecting me in more ways than one. It wasn't just about the house, the money, the stocks. It was about making sure I never forgot my place in this family, even if others tried to erase it. So no, I never gave Dad or Linda access to the property. I didn't invite them up. I didn't make peace in the way they wanted. Instead, I honored Mom by keeping it exactly as she intended for me. And every time I think about how they thought they'd taken everything, I can't help but smile. Because the truth is, they never even saw the most important part coming. And they never will.